The largest military mobilization in ancient history nearly dissolved in its own harbor. Long before the first bronze spear struck the walls of Troy, the Greek armada was paralyzed by a logistical nightmare that threatened to turn 1,200 ships into a graveyard. High King Agamemnon held the title of supreme commander, but his authority was tethered to a notoriously fragile ego. At the port of Aulis, his massive force sat dead in the water. For months, the winds refused to blow. Rations rotted in the heat, and among the 100,000 starving soldiers, the first whispers of a violent mutiny began to take hold. This wasn't a failure of planning, but a debt of pride. Agamemnon had insulted the goddess Artemis by boasting that his hunting skills surpassed her own. In retaliation, she bound the winds, demanding a price that no father should be able to pay, the ritual sacrifice of his eldest daughter, Iphigenia. Fearing that a cancelled war would cost him his crown, the High King chose political survival over his own blood. He lured his daughter to the camp with the promise of a royal wedding to the hero Achilles, only to have her slaughtered on the altar as the army watched. The winds returned, but the expedition was immediately haunted by incompetence. Navigational errors led the fleet to invade the entirely wrong country, and they soon abandoned their master archer, Philoctetes, on a desert island just because the stench of a wound on his foot made the other officers uncomfortable. Agamemnon bought his way to Troy with the life of his daughter. In doing so, he set a precedent that his own ego was more valuable than the lives of those he led, poisoning the moral foundations of the entire war. Once they reached the Troad, the Greeks realized the city was too vast to surround. These massive stone foundations reveal a perimeter that the Greek army simply couldn't encircle, turning a quick conquest into a 9-year war of economic attrition. Sustaining 100,000 men on a foreign beach required constant, brutal raids. Without a reliable supply line from Greece, the army survived only by plundering every town and farm within reach. Achilles became the essential engine of this survival effort. He systematically dismantled the regional economy, sacking 23 allied cities to strip Troy of its food, its wealth, and its tributary support. This exposed a dangerous disparity between risk and reward. Achilles took nearly every physical risk on the front lines, yet Agamemnon remained safely in the camp, claiming the vast majority of the plunder as his royal due. The entire Greek war effort was held together by this volatile imbalance. The army relied on the physical labor of a warrior who was increasingly losing respect for the man in charge. In the 9th year, the friction finally sparked. During the latest raids, Agamemnon claimed a woman named Chryseis as his prize, while Achilles took Briseis. When Chryseis' father, a priest of Apollo, arrived with a massive ransom to buy her back, Agamemnon chose to protect his image rather than the camp. He publicly insulted the priest and sent him away, refusing to part with his prize. Apollo responded by raining a devastating plague upon the Greeks. Within days, the camp was thick with the black smoke of funeral pyres, as disease slaughtered pack animals and soldiers alike. A council was called, and when the seer Calchas proved that Agamemnon's pride was the direct cause of the plague, the High King refused to take the blame. Instead, he threw a tantrum in front of his generals, demanding that his losses be covered by someone else. To maintain the appearance of dominance, Agamemnon returned Chryseis, but legally seized Achilles' own prize, Briseis. It was a public theft designed for no other reason than to prove he could take whatever he wanted. For a Greek warrior, his prize was the physical currency of his honor, or time. With his honor stolen, Achilles went on strike. He withdrew his elite troops and prayed to the gods to sabotage the Greek army, ensuring Agamemnon would feel the full weight of his own incompetence. By prioritizing his own ego over his best warrior, Agamemnon did more damage to the Greek cause than the Trojans ever could. He effectively severed his own supply line and paralyzed his military, leaving the army defenseless on a hostile beach. Without Achilles to hold the line, the Greek leadership completely fractured. Agamemnon attempted to test his army's spirit by telling them the war was over and it was time to sail home. He expected a show of loyalty. Instead, 100,000 men cheered and made a mad stampede for the ships, desperate to abandon him. Odysseus had to step into the command void, physically beating the fleeing soldiers back into battle formation. He managed to stop the desertion, but the men were now fighting only because they were forced to, not because they believed in their king. On the battlefield, a sudden opportunity for peace appeared. Paris, the Trojan prince who started the war, agreed to face King Menelaus in single combat. The winner would take Helen, and the 9-year nightmare would finally end. Menelaus utterly dominated the fight. When his sword shatters against the bronze of Paris's helmet, he simply grabs the prince by the throat and begins dragging him toward the Greek lines, seconds away from ending the war with his bare hands. But the peace was hijacked by the gods. Aphrodite plucked the gasping Paris from the dirt and teleported him safely to his bedroom, leaving the Greeks holding nothing but an empty helmet and a broken treaty. The final sabotage came from Athena. Wanting Troy utterly destroyed, she tricked a Trojan archer into shooting an arrow at Menelaus. The wound was shallow, but it drew the blood that broke the sacred oath of peace forever. Because of Agamemnon's toxic need for dominance, the Greeks were now trapped without their greatest hero and abandoned by the laws of men. The 9-year stalemate was over, and the true bloodbath was finally about to begin.